Hi guys, it's Roy from Bellados 3D here with another video, and this is part 2 of the school desk series. And in this episode I will be painting the desk in. Okay, so here we have our desk model all UV unwrapped and ready to go, all ready to take into substance paint. There's just one thing I need to do before I take it out, and that is just to move this lid GZ 0.5 so that it's not touching the top of the desk for when it's painting. And the reason for this is when we paint it, it will paint ambient occlusion. We'll paint an ambient occlusion onto it, and if the lid is all the way down touching this, it will create ambient occlusion on the underside of the lid and inside the desk there and around the rim. So if I was to take this into Unity and decide I want the desk lid open in Unity, you'll have odd shadows and ambient occlusion on the desk. It'll look a bit out of place. So what we'll do is we move it out of the way of the rest of the mesh so that that ambient occlusion isn't added, and when we bring it into Unity it can be put back into place and there won't be any odd strange shadows. So now that we've moved it, we just want to select the lid and then shift select the main body of the desk. Go to File, Export FBX. We will call it School Desk, and then make sure the selected objects is ticked in there. So export, and that's us done in Blender for now. Right, so now we're in Substance Painter and we need to bring our model in. Let's click on File and New. And in this, there's only two things I need to change in here. The file, by clicking the select button, I can choose the file there, and the document resolution. And I'm going to choose 4096 because I've found that although at the end of things I might not want the textures to be that size when used in a game, it's better to create a texture at a higher resolution than you need, and you can always scale it down. Whereas if you create a texture lower than you need, later on you can't scale it back up because you lose quality. So I'm going to create this at 4096. You get to choose whatever you want, and the rest of the settings on this can all stay the same. So let's click OK, and you see our model in the window there. Right, now we need to bake the base mesh maps. These are a set of maps which the Substance Painter will use to apply materials to when we're painting. So let's click on our Texture Settings tab up here and click on Bake Mesh Maps. Now all we need to do in here is change the output size. I'm going to make it the same as what I originally selected, and click on Bake Selected Textures, and this will take a couple of seconds. If this takes too long for you, by all means reduce the size of your textures, and it should help. And here we go, nearly done. Tick tock, tick tock. And then we click OK, and as you can see, it's created a normal map, a world space normal, an ambient occlusion map, an ID map, a curvature map, and this is all data that the software uses to apply textures. So let's start applying our materials. Right, so our desk is going to be mostly wood, I would think. So let's find some wood. We'll go back over to this menu up here and select on layers up here, and I'm going to delete the default layer, and I'm going to come back down here to the shelf right here on the side here in the menu and find Smart Materials. I can then click in the search box there, and I know there's a nice wood in here called wooden chest, so let's put chest in there, and there is our material. All we do is left click and drag that onto our model. And there we have it on our model. Now obviously at the moment that's covering everything, so what we need to do is we need to mask the areas that we want it to be on. And what I like to do is I like to add the masks to a folder and then put the material in the folder. Then that way, if I want to add other materials on top of it, I don't have to recreate the mask. I can just drop it into that folder and it works. So let's create a folder. We go up here and click on the folder icon, and let's call that wood, and let's drag that material into there. So we now have that there. And if we right click and click add a black mask, you'll see that the texture disappears. What we need to do now is tell it what we want to put the texture on. So if we come over to our left hand panel here and we find our polygon fill tool, click on that, and then over in the properties panel click on the mesh fill, and what we're going to do is we're just going to left drag across the bottom piece and then single click the top piece, and you notice everything's got the material on except for the hinges, which is exactly what we want. So let's take a look at this material, and it looks really nice, but you probably noticed the grain is going the wrong way. You probably realize when you look in real life, tables, chairs, even posts and pillars, when they're made of wood, the grain usually follows the length of the wood and not the width. So let's see about changing that round. Now normally with a normal material, under a normal plain material, if I go to materials and say just drag this into here so that it's on top, I'm going to hide that one. Normally you can go into that material, click on it, and in the properties you can change the rotation to however you want. Unfortunately, the wood that I've chosen is a smart material, and what a smart material is, it's a folder, and inside that folder are a collection of materials, filters and generators that make up the material. Really good, because there's so much you can do with it to change and adjust and you know, give it variety. Bit of a pain because there is no overall rotation. There's no overall transform controls for the whole folder. So what we would normally need to do is go through each and every one of these and click on each and every one and choose the rotation. However, there is an easier way. If we go down to the filters option in the shelf, you'll notice a transform filter, and what we can do is we can drop that into the top of the folder for the smart material, ideally in the top. However, there is a bit of an issue with Substance Painter and procedurally generated grunges like this one. Instead of just rotating the material, it rotates the mask for the material. So if I was to put it in here, as you can see, it wouldn't do anything initially. And if I clicked on transform and I change the rotation, you'll notice it's actually changing the whole of the mask. So the whole UV is rotating, which looks absolutely horrible. I'm going to set that to 90 because that's what we're going to need. Whoops. 90. And as you can see, it messes up the UVs. It's horrible. And all you need to do is to drag that transform down below any procedural that we want. And in fact, I want to take it all the way down to below the sharpen there. And there you see, it's now just rotating the material, and it's changed the main part of the grain, but as you can see, there's still a bit of grain that hasn't rotated. And the reason for that is because we have a second wood fibre right at the top there. And I've no idea why this smart material has that at the top. It doesn't need to be at the top. So I'll just grab that down and drag it down below the transform. And now we have our wood going in the exact direction that we need it to go into, which looks pretty damn good. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to add some scratches and variation and graffiti to this desk. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a fill layer into this folder. So that will be the little bucket icon here. We'll click on that, and that's actually put that right in the middle of the wood material, which we don't want that. So we're going to drag that out so that it's just above the wood material there. Okay. And that paints everything white, which obviously we don't need to do. Now what I want to do is I'm going to use a procedurally generated scratch on this, and that can be found under Smart Masks. So if we click on Smart Mask, and that will load all of these masks. And what these are basically filters and these are generators that procedurally generate various things using grunge maps. You can actually make your own by going through and adding a generator to it up there. But these are all ones that are predefined, and they're pretty good. So I'm going to search for scratch, and we've got stains scratched. So let's drag that onto our fill layer just there. And there you go. You'll notice that it now masks out most of the white and just leaves what looks like scratches and dirt and scuff. And I think that looks pretty good even from default. But it's the wrong color. So what I need to do is I need to click on the fill layer itself on the actual material and not the mask, and come down here to base color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little pipette to find a nice little lighter color. And we want with something like this, so it's a little bit lighter, not too light, maybe about there, so it looks like it's nice and worn and scratched. And there we have our basic grunge on our wood, and I think that looks pretty good as it is. But I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to add my old friend Chad. Now, if you were in school in the 80s, the early 80s, the late 70s, you would have probably seen or heard about Chad. And Chad is a bit of graffiti that was everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And it was a little image of a little man with a big nose, with his nose hanging over the wall and his two hands holding onto the wall. And that was Chad. Chad was here. And so I'm going to add that to this. And quite simply, I've got a black and white image here, which I'm going to drag into my shelf, which I drew earlier on. And that will bring up the import settings. And what we're going to do is, where it says undefined, I need to change that to an alpha, because I'm going to use that as an alpha. In fact, I'm actually going to use it as a stencil, but it will be classed as an alpha. And then if I go down to import your resources to, and choose project, and that with this project, and then click import, and you'll notice it switches to the alpha section of the shelf and highlights Chad. So now we want to paint Chad onto our wood, and to do that we need to create a paint layer within this folder here, just above the wood. And we do that with this icon here, little paintbrush there, paint layer. And that creates a paint layer so we can actually paint onto the wood like so. And let's delete that. If we go into the properties for the paint layer and we scroll down, we will find a little section there, stencil. And all we do is we drag Chad into our stencil just there. And as you can see, it appears as a stencil over the top of the view. Now we can adjust that stencil by holding the S button down, and then with the left mouse button we can rotate it, and I'm going to rotate it around about there. With the right mouse button we can move in and out to change the size, and then we can press Alt and the middle mouse button to move the model around to position it. And I think if we just adjust that a little bit, I think we should just have him just about here. And let's test this. If we just left click and rub over the top of it, you can see it paints it onto the surface. But obviously it would have been done in pen and there'd be a little bit of an indentation in it. So I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to go down to the properties and select the base color, and on this little white bar there I'll get a color selection. If I click and hold on the pipette there, I can choose colors, or if I click on dynamic I can change the colors in here. I'm going to change that. I'm going to give it a bluey sort of color, sort of blue pen, and I think that'd be about the right color there. And now if I scroll down again, I can drag the height just down just a tiny little bit, and that should give it a little bit of an indentation. So now when I paint over the top of it, you can see it paints it in blue. And if I scroll in and move around, you'll see that it just indents it into it as if it's been scribed in with a pen. And that's pretty much all we need to do with Chad. I'm going to just quickly drag in the three alphas from the previous the locker tutorial, and I'm going to add them, and these are the graffiti alphas. So we've now got someone's carved their initials in there. Now what we can also do, we can also go up to here, and where you see the 100 there, that's our opacity. We can bring that down so the whole layer is so a little bit more opaque, so it looks a little bit more worn and a little bit less new on there. And that's our graffiti and on our desks. So what we've created is a wooden base color, base material, with some graffiti, some scratches, some wear and tear on there. Now next we have, all we need to do to finish this off is to paint the hinges. So let's go back up to our layers and create a folder, and we just move that outside of the other folder so it's on top, and we'll close that one down. And let's change that to metal. And let's see what sort of metals we have. I'm going to click on all in the shelf and then click on the search and type metal. And let's have a look at some of these. I think probably what we'll need is something like iron ore. That would probably do the job. And we'll drag that into that one there, and of course that covers everything on the whole model. We only want it to cover the hinges. So if we right click on the folder and click add black mask, that clears the texture, and then with the mask selected we go to the polygon fill, select mesh fill, and just click on the hinges. And let's go around to the other side and click on the hinges. And then we have our base material for our hinges. And if I just click onto that folder, you'll see how it looks. Now we want to add a little bit of detail, and this would be held on with a few screws. So what I want to do is open up that folder. I'm going to create another paint layer and drag that into that folder and on above the metal there. And this, all I want to do is affect the height, nothing else. So I'm going to turn off the color, the metallic, the normal, and the roughness, and leave the normal and the height on. And I want to bring up the height to about, I think that should be about right. And now I want to just clear the stencil off of that. I don't need the stencil, but I do need an alpha. I'm going to go to the alphas, and I'm going to click on the search bar and type in circle, and we have a nice little circle with a cross in the middle, which could represent a Phillips head screw, and we're going to drag that into the alpha. So now we can draw the on the object like so. So let's reduce the size of the brush. We hold the control button down and scroll down and get it to about the right size. I'm just going to put that back into position there. Make sure that's in orthographic view. And I'm going to just click on there. And that gives us our nice little screw. We'll have one at this end, about the middle there. One on the end. And one on the other end. And one in the middle there. In fact, I'm going to take my eraser. I'm going to erase that. I'm going to go back to the brush. I'm going to put one around here. One around here. And that gives us our detail, our screws on our hinge. And let's bring that back round to this side, and we'll do exactly the same thing on this side. So let's bring it closer. One in the middle around here, one on the end here, one on this end, and then two in the middle there, around there and there. And that gives us our hinge. And that's it. That's our desk all painted up nicely and all ready to be exported, the textures to be exported and to be put into Unity. So let's go up to File and go down to Export Textures. And we'll choose our output directory. And I'm going to find where my files are. Bellados 3D files. Oh, excuse me, B3D videos, abandoned school, and desks, and textures. And we will select that folder. And the output template, we want to change that to, let's go down, and we're going to bring it into Unity. So we can bring it into Unity, I think, Unity, there's multiple different ones. We're going to do the Universal Render Pipeline Metallic Standard. And if I go into here and scroll down, you see Universal Render Pipeline Metallic Standard. This will show you what these textures are. In Unity, they use different channels in the textures to share different materials. So in the actual albedo texture, the RGB channel has the base color and the alpha channel has the opacity. In the metallic smoothness texture, the RGB channel has the metallic grayscale and the alpha channel has the glossiness or roughness. And then we have the normal map is an RGB and the emission, which we're not using, is an RGB. So let's go back to the settings. So we've chosen our location, we've chosen what format it's going to be downloaded in. We want to change the, we want to select the file type. I usually use PNG for most things. You can choose your own texture format for your final work based on how it's going to be used. But I generally export everything as PNG and then convert later. The size, obviously, it's 496. Choose your own setting there, and then all you do is export, and that will export your textures into your folders. So now if I go to my textures folder, you'll see 3 textures in my textures folder right there. And let's put that back over there. And we just can close this down. Now, I would always recommend saving your project so you can come back to it and change it later if it doesn't work out. But that's pretty much it. We can close down Substance Painter. Next step is a quick bit of preparation in Blender and then into Unity. So now we're back into Blender, and all we need to do is just prepare this model and export it ready for Unity. And let's take a look. What we need is we need the main part of the desk, the origin point, we need right down there at the bottom, which we already have. And the reason for this is because it uses that origin point as the insertion point into Unity. So that will be the ground level in Unity. So when you place this, it will be on that ground level. We need to reset this back down. So GZ minus 0.5. So that it's back on to the desk. Now what I want to do with this piece, because it's a hinged lid, I need the rotation point, the origin point of the lid between these two pieces here, so that when I use it in Unity, I can rotate it on that location like a desk would normally hinge. So to do that, I'm going to go into the main part of the model, and face mode, I'm going to select this face here and this face here, and I'm going to press Shift S, cursor to selected, so that brings the cursor in line with these bits here. Tab back out, click on the lid, and I can then right click and set origin to 3D cursor, and that now means that if I rotate this RX, it rotates on the hinged part just like it would in real life. So that model's now ready to export. I'm just going to press the N key to bring up our transform menu. Just make sure our rotation and our scale is correct, and the same on that piece, rotation and scale is correct. So if I select the lid and the base, I can then go File, Export, FBX, find my meshes folder. I'm going to change the name of this so that it's not the same as the one that I used before, school_desk, and I'm going to select this checkbox here for selected objects. Now, when you take models into Unity, you need to make sure it goes in at the right scale and rotation. So what we need to do is apply scalings, FBX unit scales, and then apply a transform, and that should give you the right rotation and scaling for your model. And we just click export, and that's it. That's our model exported. Let's put it into Unity. So now we have a brand new empty Unity scene, and what we need to do is we need to bring our model into this. So what we need to do is to go back to our folder and find our mesh, and then just drag it into the scene. And now what I like to do is I like to do a nice bit of cleanup. I'm going to create a folder and call it mesh or meshes. I'm going to drag that into that folder. I'm going to create another folder called textures and another folder called materials. This just keeps it all nice and neat and easy to find. So let's go into the meshes, and you'll notice that the mesh contains the two objects and two materials, and I don't know where that second material's come from. I probably had that was one of my experiments at some point while I was creating the model. But we don't need that one, but we do need this one. And you'll notice that it's not editable because it's locked inside that material. So we need to bring that material out of the mesh. So let's select both of those and right click and export from prefab. And if we go back to the assets folder and then the materials folder and select that folder, you notice it disappears from this mesh, and if we go to our materials folder, it's in there. Let's delete this one and click on this one, and you notice we can now change everything inside that mesh. So what we need to do is we need to add textures. So let's go back to assets and textures, and we just select and drag all three of them into Unity. And let's just do a quick check of these. Default texture looks about right, and that should be about right. And when we come to the normal map, we want to change that from default to normal map and click apply, and that tells it that it's a normal map and treats it as a normal map. So now if we go back to assets and materials, we click on the material, and we want to be able to drag those textures into these slots. But if I was to go back now and try and go into textures, it would clear the inspector there. So let's go back to materials, click on it, and just click on this little padlock just up here, and that locks this screen so that no matter what we select on, it doesn't clear that. So let's go to our textures and drag our albedo into the albedo slot, our metallic smoothness into the metallic smoothness slot, and our normal into the normal slot. One thing I do know is the metallic, even though it's using the metallic and the smoothness from the texture, we still have control over the smoothness. And with it full 1, it makes the texture a little bit dark. So let's put 0.9 in there. And let's bring our model into the scene. So let's go to meshes and we'll drop that into our hierarchy and go back to assets and materials, and we'll just drop that material on top of there. And as you see, there is our model in the scene and all nicely textured. As you can see, there's normals a little bit rough on that, so if I just drop that down to 0.8 on there, maybe 0.5, and that just smooths it out a little bit. And there's our model in the scene there with all its scratches and all the details that we added, the graffiti. And there's our buddy Chad, if you can just about see him just there. And that's it for this tutorial. Just a quick leap into adding into entities into Unity. I hope you've learned something. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, hit the like and let your friends know. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. If you want to be notified of any upcoming videos, then hit the notification bell. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you in my next video.